He has no problem with bad people paying to have other bad people killed. He basically sees himself as a garbage man with a gun. Hi folks, Harry here, and today I'm so excited to give you my review on Billy Summers by Stephen King. Billy Summers is Stephen King's brand new book, which was released on August the 3rd, 2021, which is today at the time of filming. I don't actually have a physical copy yet, so I did indeed read it on my Kindle, but as soon as I get my physical copy, I will let you know straight away. Recently, Stephen King has kind of been gravitating more towards crime than horror. So recently he has published things like the Bill Hodges trilogy, The Outsider, and the sequel to The Outsider, If It Bleeds. And these are mostly crime novels kind of sprinkled in with tiny little bits of horror, because after all, that is what Stephen King is known for. But now with Billy Summers, Stephen King has basically deviated entirely from the horror genre and created an amazing thriller crime novel. This novel follows a man named Billy Summers, who is a retired war veteran and is now a killer for hire, and is the best in the business. But he will only agree to do the job if the person he must kill is a bad person. But now he wants out of the job, but he has one final kill to do. I have to say, I did not love everything about this book. It was definitely not a perfect book by any means, but there were a lot of things that I absolutely loved about it. First of all, the characters were absolutely incredible. Billy Summers as a protagonist is so amazing. I am a little bit biased because I love books about assassins, but Billy Summers just as a character, I think is one of Stephen King's best protagonists in recent years. And the other standout character to me is Alice. Alice is a young woman that Billy Summers meets later on in the novel, but she is by far my favourite character in the entire book. As a thriller, this novel was brilliant. I think that this is Stephen King's most thrilling novel since 11/22/63, and because this book came out in 2011, I think that Billy Summers is the most thrilling Stephen King book of the last 10 years. There are two books that I'd like to compare this book to. The first is one of his own, and that is The Dead Zone. The Dead Zone kind of has an assassination plotline, it's quite political, and I do think that Billy Summers bears many similarities to this 1970s novel. But I also think that Billy Summers in many ways has a lot of similarities to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I think The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is quite possibly my favourite crime novel of all time. It just ticks every single box for me. And the reasons why I think that Billy Summers is quite similar to this book, I will get into later. Because this is a spoiler-free review, I'm not going to go too in-depth, but there are two more very positive things that I have to say about this book, and then I'm going to get into the flaws. The first of those being, this book has so many references to a little novel that Stephen King wrote called The Shining. Billy Summers has so many homages to this novel, it is absolutely wonderful to read. Especially in the second half of the book, there are so many references to this book, and I love The Shining. I think that this novel is perfect in every way, and that is not a word that I use lightly. I really appreciated the references to The Shining in Billy Summers. Because Stephen King's books are all connected in some way, I was just anticipating a reference to another Stephen King book within Billy Summers. My Kindle just turned off. And around the halfway mark, we had a wonderful reference to The Shining. And I was like, yes, finally, this is what I've wanted. And then it kept getting better and better. In fact, there was a reference to The Shining in Billy Summers that I think adds to the lore of the Stephen King multiverse, and in general, adds to the story of The Shining and just how the ghosts of The Shining work. That won't make sense now, but once you read it, you'll understand. And lastly, in terms of spoiler-free positives, the ending of this book was amazing. I'm not going to say anything about it, but the ending was fantastic. Okay, now we're going to get into the flaws, because there are quite a few flaws, but I'm not going to be too harsh, because I love this book, but it just wasn't perfect. First of all, the storyline did not feel anywhere near as fluent as Stephen King's other works. It was kind of all over the place in quite a messy fashion. And it changed directions about a million times, and yes, it made the story unpredictable, but in a way also quite frustrating at the same time. For anyone who's wanting to read this book, I have to let you know straight away there are a lot of themes of sexual violence and abuse in this book. So if that is something that triggers you, please go into this book with caution, because I really do not want you to read this book if you are triggered by those things, because it is handled very heavily. But Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The reason why I think that these books are similar is I think that the way that sexual violence is handled in Billy Summers is very similar to the way that Stieg Larsson did it. In fact, there is a scene which contains sexual violence in Billy Summers that is basically a carbon copy of a scene from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. But sexual violence isn't the only thing The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Billy Summers have in common. They have a lot of other similarities, the main one being they're both fantastic crime novels that are definitely worth a read. Before going into this novel, I did know that there were going to be themes of sexual abuse, so I did mentally prepare myself for it, and I'm very, very glad that I did. In the past, Stephen King has put sexual violence in his books and not handled it very maturely and not very sensitively. But I think that this book was an improvement for King in that field because he did handle it with more sensitivity, and in general there was just more justice, a lot more justice than in other Stephen King books, so I did appreciate this book for that. There was one thing in this book that did bother me, but I'm wondering if it enters spoiler territory. If Editing Harry believes that this is a spoiler, then I will edit it out. What I believed was going to be the ending of this book happened very early on, and then every point after that didn't quite reach my expectations. That's all I'm going to say about it, because I really, really do not want to spoil this book. But let's just say that the synopsis of this book is basically the synopsis of the first couple of pages, and then everything after that is something completely different. Going back to a positive note, this book delved so deep into friendship and love and family that I thought was incredible. Billy as a character is just the kind of person that gets along with everyone, and because of that he forms many great friendships that are wonderful to watch blossom. So overall, I rated this book 4.5 stars out of 5, because I really, really enjoyed it, but there were just a few things that bothered me and prevented it from being complete perfection. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a big fat thumbs up, and please consider subscribing for more bookish content from me. All of my social media links, so that's my Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Goodreads, Letterboxd, all of that is in the description below, and I will see you next time with a new video. Goodbye.